I am not dramatic by nature, so when I say that one ordinary night quietly destroyed my marriage, I mean it in the most literal way. No shouting. No confrontation. No moment where the room spun or my hands shook. Just a night that ended wrong and a morning that pretended nothing happened. That contrast was the first crack, and I did not understand it yet. It was a Tuesday, which already tells you how unremarkable it was supposed to be. Nothing bad is ever supposed to happen on a day like that. We lived in a quiet residential complex outside Columbus, one of those mid-rise places that try to feel suburban even though they clearly are not. I had finished work late, ate leftovers standing at the kitchen counter, and assumed my wife would be home soon. She said she had a work thing. Those words had never meant anything dangerous before. By 10, the house was still quiet. By 11, I sent a short message asking if she was okay. No answer. Midnight passed, then 1. I did not panic. I told myself she crashed at a coworker's place, phone dead, nothing dramatic. That is what trust sounds like before it breaks. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up again, not from a sound, but from the absence of one. Her car was not in the driveway. Her side of the bed was cold. I checked my phone. Still nothing. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and realizing how loud silence can get when it is doing something on purpose. She came home a little after 7. I was in the kitchen making coffee, already dressed, already pretending the night had not happened. She walked in calmly, keys on the counter, jacket off, like she had just gone out for groceries. No apology. No explanation. She kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted eggs. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not because she stayed out. Not even because she did not answer. But because she acted as if the gap in time did not exist. As if reality could be edited by confidence alone. I said nothing. I nodded. I sat down. And I watched my wife cook breakfast like the night before had never happened. At work that day, I could not focus. Not because I was angry, but because I felt erased. Hours had passed where I did not exist in her world, and she seemed comfortable with that. When I came home that evening, the house felt different. Not emptier. Cleaner. Like something had been moved back into place after being disturbed. That was when I realized this was not about where she had been. It was about how easily she stepped back into the marriage without bringing the truth with her. And once I noticed that, I could not stop noticing the other things. The way her phone never left her hand. The way she avoided specifics. The way normal started to feel rehearsed. I did not confront her. Not yet. I told myself I needed clarity, not emotion. I believed that if I watched carefully enough, the truth would surface on its own. What I did not understand was that the truth had already been there that morning, standing in my kitchen, making eggs, acting like I had imagined an entire missing night. And that was the first time I thought, very calmly, that my wife might be capable of lying without feeling anything at all. After that morning, nothing exploded. That was the unsettling part. Life did not collapse into chaos or argument. It kept moving, which made everything worse. I went to work. She went to work. We ate dinner. We talked about bills and groceries and a neighbor who was repainting his garage too bright. Normal kept happening, but it felt thinner, like a surface stretched too tight. I told myself I was being paranoid. One night does not define a marriage. People disappear sometimes. Phones die. Plans change. That logic sounded reasonable during the day. At night, it fell apart. I started waking up at the smallest sounds. The vibration of her phone on the nightstand. The creak of the hallway floor. I would lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying the calm confidence in her voice when she asked about eggs. Not defensive. Not guilty. Comfortable. I began noticing patterns I had never needed to notice before. She started showering as soon as she came home, even on days when she barely left the house. Her phone was always face down. When it buzzed, she checked it instantly, then smiled to herself in a way that did not invite conversation. If I asked how her day was, the answers became abstract. Busy. Long same stuff. No names. No details. Nothing to grab onto. One evening, about a week later, she told me she was going out again. Another work thing. Same phrase. I watched her get ready this time. Not obviously different, but careful. Clothes chosen with intention. Makeup just a little more deliberate. I realized I was holding my breath without noticing. She kissed me goodbye like always, and I stood in the doorway watching her drive off, already knowing how the night would end. She did not come home until morning. Again. And what scared me wasn't that she lied. It was that she barely bothered to make it convincing. This time she looked tired in a way she could not fully hide. Her patience was thinner. When I asked where she had been, she answered too fast, then corrected herself, like she had skipped a line in her head. This time, I did not sleep. I sat on the couch with the lights off, watching the dark window reflect my own outline back at me. I checked the time every few minutes. I checked my phone even though I knew there would be nothing. What unsettled me was not the absence. It was how quickly my mind stopped looking for explanations and started preparing for acceptance. Like something inside me had already adjusted. When she walked in just before sunrise, she looked surprised to see me awake. Just for a second. Then it disappeared. She said I should go back to bed. She said I worried too much. She said it was just work. I nodded. I let it go. I hated myself a little for how easy that was. After the second night she did not come home, something shifted in me. I stopped wondering if I was overreacting and started wondering how long this had been going on without me noticing. Sometimes she was home. Sometimes she was not. Sometimes she texted. Sometimes she did not. It wasn't random. It was curated just enough to look accidental. There was no rhythm, which made it impossible to argue against. If there had been a pattern, I could have pointed to it. Instead, there was just uncertainty, carefully spaced so it never looked intentional. The worst part was how normal she seemed when she was present. She laughed. She asked about my day. She planned a weekend trip, even picked a hotel, then work cancelled it 2 days before. It felt like living with someone who had learned how to simulate intimacy without participating in it. I was still her husband in function. Just not in priority. I thought about confronting her dozens of times. One night I picked up her phone while she was in the shower. It was unlocked. I stood there longer than I want to admit. Then I put it back exactly where it was, angry at myself for even getting that close. I told myself that was restraint. It felt more like fear. Each time, I stopped myself. I wanted facts. I wanted certainty. I told myself that accusing her without proof would only make me look insecure. I convinced myself that staying quiet was strength. In reality, it was self-protection. Fear that once I spoke, there would be no way to unhear the answer. The escalation did not come from a single discovery. It came from accumulation. From realizing that my presence had become optional. That my concern was treated like an inconvenience. That the marriage no longer reacted to my absence of trust because it had already adapted to life without it. One night, while she slept beside me, phone glowing softly in her hand, I understood something clearly for the first time. Whatever was happening was not a mistake. It was a choice repeated often enough to become normal. And if I wanted the truth, I would not get it by waiting for her to offer it. That was when I decided to stop being a passive observer in my own marriage. I did not plan to find anything. That matters, because it means I was not hunting for betrayal the way people imagine. I was not checking her messages or installing apps or following her car. I was still pretending that if I stayed calm and reasonable, the truth would respect that. The discovery came from something smaller and more ordinary, which somehow made it heavier. It started with a receipt. I was cleaning out the center console of her car on a Saturday morning, the kind of boring chore you do when you're trying not to think. Old napkins, a couple of pens, loose change. At the bottom, folded twice, was a receipt from a hotel downtown. Not a cheap one. Valet parking. Late checkout. 2 nights. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, holding that thin strip of paper like it weighed something. The date lined up with the first night she did not come home, which I immediately tried to explain away. A work gift. A friend. Anything but what it looked like. The second night was a weekday. She had told me she was working late. I did not feel shock. I felt confirmation. There is a difference. Shock is loud. Confirmation is quiet and cold. I folded the receipt back exactly how I found it and put it where it was. That detail mattered to me at the time. I think part of me still wanted to believe that if I did not disturb the environment, the truth would stay manageable. I went back inside and made coffee. She kissed me and asked if I wanted to go grocery shopping later. I said sure. The second discovery came from someone else. A few days later, I ran into Mark outside our building. He lived a few units down the same hallway, friendly in a distant way. We had talked a few times about work and weather and nothing that mattered. As we stood near the mailboxes in the lobby, he mentioned my wife casually. Asked if she was still working late downtown. The words landed wrong. I asked what he meant. He hesitated, then shrugged. Said he had seen her a few times coming in early mornings, wearing the red coat she always wore in winter. Said he assumed she was staying with someone downtown for work. The way he said it made it clear he thought I already knew. That was the moment my isolation broke. Not because he revealed anything new, but because he confirmed that my confusion was visible to others. I laughed it off. People always misinterpret things. That is what I told him. That is what I told myself. But the elevator ride felt longer than it should have. When I got back upstairs, the apartment felt smaller, like I had been unknowingly sharing space with a secret. That night, I checked the credit card statement. I handled our budgeting, so it wasn't unusual. Not because I wanted to, but because the idea had rooted itself and would not leave. There were charges I did not recognize. Hotels. Parking garages. Restaurants I had never been to. Spread out just enough to look accidental. Not enough to ignore once you knew what you were looking at. The unexpected ally was not a person who wanted to help. It was information that stopped pretending to be invisible. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. Dates lined up. Locations made sense. Gaps filled themselves in without needing imagination. Still, there was something missing. A reason. Not justification, but context. Affairs are messy, but this felt organized. Scheduled. Maintained. It did not feel like she was escaping something. It felt like she was managing something. Two lives running in parallel, neither colliding because collision had been planned around. I realized then that the nights she stayed were not signs of loyalty. They were maintenance. Keeping the structure intact. Giving me just enough normal to prevent collapse. The nights she left were not accidents. They were the real schedule. The worst part was how long it took me to accept that this had been happening while I believed we were fine. Not struggling. Not distant. Fine. That realization did more damage than the evidence itself. It reframed every memory from the last year, stripping them of innocence. I went to bed that night knowing I had crossed a line internally. I was no longer guessing. I was no longer waiting. I was holding pieces of a truth that did not care whether I was ready for it. And I understood that if I confronted her now, without knowing everything, she would control the story. She had practice. I did not. So I did the only thing that made sense. I stayed quiet. I thought I was prepared for confrontation. I had rehearsed it in my head during long drives and sleepless nights. Calm questions. Controlled tone. Evidence laid out carefully. What I did not prepare for was how quickly preparation dissolves when the other person refuses to acknowledge reality at all. The moment came on a Thursday evening. She was home early, unusually relaxed, moving through the apartment like she owned the air itself. I watched her for a while before speaking, noticing how comfortable she was in a space that suddenly felt foreign to me. When I finally asked where she had been the previous night, she answered without hesitation. Work. Same word. Same delivery. Perfectly practiced. I told her I knew that was not true. She did not raise her voice. She did not deny it immediately. She sighed, like someone dealing with an unreasonable request, and asked me why I was doing this. That question hit harder than any confession could have. Not what are you talking about? Not what do you mean? Why are you doing this? As if my need for truth was the problem. I mentioned the hotel. The charges. The morning she came home when she thought I was asleep. I watched her face carefully, expecting cracks. There were none. Instead, something else appeared. Calculation. She told me I was misinterpreting things. She told me I was jumping to conclusions. She told me stress was making me suspicious. She spoke confidently, but the calm slipped for just a moment. Her voice sharpened, not loud, just irritated, like I was delaying her rather than confronting her. That was when I realized the greatest challenge was not exposing the affair. It was surviving the way she rewrote reality in real time. She admitted nothing. She offered explanations that sounded plausible until you examined them closely, then shifted before I could pin them down. Co-workers became clients. Late nights became emergencies. Hotels became places she waited out long hours between meetings. Each answer was smooth. Each one slid past the last without connecting. At some point, I stopped arguing facts and started listening to tone. She was not afraid of losing me. She was afraid of inconvenience. Of disruption. Of having to restructure the system she had built. That understanding landed heavily. I was not confronting a guilty partner. I was interrupting a process. The moment everything nearly collapsed was when she said something I had not expected. She told me that even if something had happened, it did not mean our marriage was over. She said people make adjustments. She said this did not have to change anything unless I wanted it to. I laughed before I could stop myself. Not loud. Just a short sound that surprised both of us. That was the first time I lost control, and I did not apologize for it. I felt something break then. Not anger. Clarity. I saw the marriage as she saw it. A container. Useful. Flexible. Optional. Like a lease you renew as long as you don't ask questions. And I understood that if I stayed, I would be agreeing to disappear quietly inside it. I stood up. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I told her I was not asking for permission to be hurt. I told her I was done pretending. She looked at me with something close to annoyance, like I had failed to follow a script. For the first time since this started, she raised her voice slightly, asking where I thought I would go. That question was the turning point. I realized she assumed I had nowhere else to stand. That everything I was depended on the life we shared. That belief had given her confidence. I told her I would figure it out. I told her that uncertainty was better than erasure. I packed a bag slowly. Deliberately. She followed me from room to room, not begging, not apologizing, just insisting that I was overreacting. Each word pushed me further away. By the time I reached the door, I felt lighter than I had in months. The hallway outside our apartment was quiet. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt final, even though I knew nothing was resolved yet. I sat in my car for a long time before starting it, breathing through the realization that the hardest part was over. Not the leaving. The choosing. Everything had seemed lost because I had believed the marriage was the ground beneath me. In reality, it had been a structure I was allowed to stand on only as long as I stayed quiet. Walking away did not give me victory. It gave me agency. And for the first time since that night she did not come home, I felt like myself again. I did not tell anyone where I went that night. Not because I wanted secrecy, but because I did not yet have language for what had happened. I checked into a small hotel on the edge of the city, the kind with thin walls and outdated furniture, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. My phone buzzed several times. I did not look. I needed a few hours where no one could rewrite anything for me. The next morning felt unreal in a quiet way. Not dramatic. Just hollow. I woke up early, showered longer than necessary, and realized that for the first time in years, no one was expecting me to explain myself. That freedom was unsettling. I kept reaching for my phone out of habit, then stopping. Whatever conversation waited on the other side of it would demand decisions I was not ready to make yet. Over the next few days, reality returned in fragments. I went back to work. I answered emails. I told my boss I needed some time. I slept poorly but deeply. The adrenaline faded, replaced by something heavier and slower. Grief, maybe. Or just the exhaustion that comes after holding yourself together for too long. She reached out eventually. Not immediately. That delay told me more than the messages themselves. When she did, the tone was controlled, practical, almost managerial. She wanted to talk logistics. She wanted to understand what I planned to do. She wanted clarity. What she did not want was accountability. There was still no apology. No acknowledgement of harm. Just irritation that the system had stopped functioning. We met once, in a public place. Coffee. Neutral territory. She looked the same. Calm. Composed. Slightly annoyed. She told me she never meant to hurt me. She said that sentence like it should close the conversation. I listened without interrupting, realizing that this was as close to honesty as she would ever come. When I asked her why she never came home that night, why she chose silence instead of truth, she hesitated for the first time. Not long. Just enough. Then she said something that settled everything. She said she did not think it would matter. That was it. No malice. No drama. Just indifference wrapped in confidence. I nodded. I told her I understood. And for the first time, that was true. She had not betrayed me in a moment of weakness. She had done it from a place of certainty. Certainty that I would adapt. Certainty that the marriage would absorb it. Certainty that my pain would be temporary and manageable. I left that meeting knowing there would be no clean ending. No apology that fixed anything. No explanation that restored meaning. Closure was not something she could give me, because she never believed it was necessary. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. There were legal steps. Paperwork. Conversations that stayed strictly functional. I moved into a small apartment across town. I learned how to sit with myself in the evenings without distraction. Some nights were easier than others. Some nights I replayed memories, wondering how many of them had been placeholders for something else. What surprised me most was not the sadness. It was the relief. The absence of tension I had mistaken for comfort. I stopped second-guessing my instincts. I stopped explaining away inconsistencies. I trusted my own perception again. That alone felt like recovery. People asked questions. I gave simple answers. We grew apart. It did not work. The truth was longer and uglier, but it was mine to keep. I did not owe anyone the full story. Especially not those who wanted it as entertainment. Sometimes I still think about that first night. The silence. The cold bed. The morning eggs. I think about how easily I accepted something that should have demanded explanation. Not because I was weak, but because I believed in continuity. I believed that what we had yesterday would protect today. That belief cost me time, but it taught me something valuable. Trust is not about proof. It is about presence. And presence is the one thing you notice only after it's gone. When someone can remove themselves from your life for hours, for nights, and return without bringing truth back with them, they are already gone. Staying after that does not make you loyal. It makes you optional. I did not win anything by leaving. There was no triumph. No sense of justice. What I gained was smaller and harder to describe. I kept my sense of reality intact. I refused to participate in a version of life where my absence was convenient. The ending is not clean. I do not know if she ever understood what she lost, or if she simply replaced the structure with another one. I stopped trying to imagine it. Some questions are traps disguised as curiosity. What I know is this. The night she did not come home was not the end of my marriage. It was the moment I realized I had already been living alone. Walking away just made that truth visible. And if there is a lesson in that, it is not about betrayal or forgiveness. It is about attention. About noticing when your presence stops being required. About having the courage to leave when you realize you are no longer part of the reality being built around you. Some endings do not explode. They fade quietly, the way that night did, with a cold bed and too much silence. Same silence. Different me. If you are not careful, you fade with it. I chose not to. Thanks for listening. If this story stayed with you, feel free to subscribe. New stories coming soon.